Hello, I'm David Bulow, Director of Educational Programs at Proformative, the online community for corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's technology demo, Reduce the Time, Risk, and Cost of Regulatory Disclosure Management. In today's business environment, you need to build and maintain stockholder confidence, both internally and externally. It's critical to deliver timely and accurate financial statements and reports, achieve a faster, more accurate financial close. SAP Disclosure Management software can provide you with a flexible, collaborative disclosure process across teams, geographies, systems, and data sources, allowing you to accelerate your close, increase visibility without sacrificing compliance. I want to thank SAP for sponsoring this event. A few items before we get started. I want to thank everyone who is returning, and those who are new, welcome. Proformative is the fastest growing online resource for senior level corporate finance, treasury, and accounting professionals. It's a uniquely valuable online peer network with direct subject matter expert advice. It's all completely noise-free. Please check it out at proformative.com. The link to today's presentation and a recording of this webinar will be sent out to all attendees within 24 hours of the event. If you would like to download today's slides, please click on proformative.com/resources and it's available to download now. There is no CPE credit for this technology demo, but we do ask everyone to please utilize the question box in the GoToWebinar panel, and we will get to those questions at the end of the presentation. You'll be asked to take a short survey regarding the webinar. We really appreciate your feedback, as this helps us deliver great content and to continue to improve. Now for today's learning objectives, is to understand the impact of new regulatory filing requirements on finance, understand the key issues for solution adoption in the close-to-disclose process, and to understand how SAP solutions can help streamline and simplify the close-to-disclose process. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Tony Wright. Tony is a principal solution engineer at SAP specializing in enterprise performance management. Tony has over 23 years of consulting, sales, and product management experience in the EPM arena. In his current role, he is responsible for helping companies understand how SAP solutions for finance can help them run better. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tony.
Thanks very much, David. Good morning, good afternoon to everybody on the phone. Just to level set for the next hour, the topics I'd like to cover with you. First of all, I'd like to just kind of ground set everybody and get us thinking about some of the dynamics that we're experiencing in the finance arena that really sort of help to ground us and see how the types of solutions we're going to talk about today have a critical role in helping us to adapt to those dynamics within the market and within the regulatory environment. From there, I want to give you a quick solution overview, help you understand the value proposition of the solution and some basic concepts, then get into a demonstration of the software that's been sort of pre-recorded to ensure we mitigate any technical risk, and also with the short amount of time that we have today. And then finally, we'll wrap it up with questions and survey, and we'll say goodbye. There's a lot of pressures out there today that we're facing in finance, and they're putting a lot of stress on finance organizations and their ability. The core fundamental goal is to help organizations make sound decisions that benefit the organization and help them to sort of maintain or gain strategic advantage and competitive advantage and compete effectively in the marketplace. We're seeing a lot of volatility in economic conditions. We're all familiar with what's going on in Europe and some of the countries there that are struggling. And those things affect us, maybe implicitly in some cases, and maybe in some cases explicitly if we trade in those markets. We're getting a lot of focus on risk and how can we manage and mitigate risk. because at the end of the day, those things have, in a lot of cases, a financial impact. Regulators are continuing to burden us, if you will, and ask for additional information, additional filings. They're trying to sort of make sure that we're doing the right things and we're acting prudently and in the best interests of consumers, customers, and everyone alike. We, of course, are seeing that globalization, the fact that really all of us are competing in a global marketplace now, and that, you know, we've got a lot of companies that are starting up in various different corners of the world and are able to compete effectively and erode our markets. And we have to be able to compete with those folks effectively, and also conduct our operations on a global basis as if everybody's sitting in the same room. We've got that ever-increasing pressure on margins. We need to squeeze every last dollar we can and be as efficient as we can, so that we're sending the value to the shareholders, stockholders alike. And there's a lot of innovative business models out there, folks who are coming up with interesting twists on how to do business, and they're putting a lot of pressure on us as well. So think of all of those things competing or placing pressure on finance, and that's really the new normal. This is not going to go away, and so we need to make best use of the technology, the solutions, the skills of our employees to be able to continue to make sound decisions that benefit the organization. All of this is going on, and poor finance is stuck in the middle and walking that tightrope and trying to balance all of these pressures. We've got to make sure that the company is in compliance with all the regulatory demands that are being placed on us, and that we have effective risk management within the company so that we're aware of the risks, their consequences, and we can help to mitigate those. We want to be able to outperform the financial objectives that are expectations that are set in the marketplace, and create not only value on a quarter-by-quarter basis, but also on a sustainable basis into the future. And we want to deliver all of this to our organizations and our stakeholders, of course, at reduced cost. So finance has got to balance all of these pressures. From a CXO perspective, as we start to sort of dial in a little bit on some of these close-to-disclose issues, what we're seeing is that these new requirements, things like XBRL that we'll talk about today and IFRS, are really, they're just adding to the amount of complexity and detail and workload that we have to perform within the financial reporting process. And how do we deal with that? We also recognize that electronic disclosure of information is becoming a key driver of communicating to not only regulators but also to the market as well, and we need to embrace that and find ways, maybe social media, etc., of communicating with all the various different stakeholders that we have that are interested in the results and information about our company. And also that, particularly as it relates to regulatory filings, the reports that we are filing are not only just public documents, but they're binding legal contracts that are holding CEOs and CFOs, little typo there, apologies for that, responsible for the content within. And so we got to be super sure that those things are accurate. So really from that perspective, it's all about managing the risk, and we've already talked about that. Many different companies want to be better at close-to-disclose. But what does that mean? Different types of companies have different types of challenges in this area, areas in which they struggle, depending upon what how they do business, where they do business, what types of business models they have. So some of these metrics here are key things to think of that a lot of our customers measure themselves against as they strive to be better in close-to-disclose. So how many different source systems contain that source data? A lot of folks are rationalizing that nowadays, and they want to minimize and reduce that. They want to reduce the cost of finance as a percentage of revenue, and that's a measure of efficiency. How many financial restatements are we doing? How effective are we at getting it right the first time? Also, how many days does it take us to go from financial statements to generate financial statements after the results are consolidated. That's a measure of world-class companies, and world-class companies often do that in 10 days. And also, how much money are we spending on outsourcing some of these activities to sort of offset some of the lack of skills that we have in-house. So a lot of companies are measuring themselves in these types of ways as it relates to close-to-disclose. You may measure yourselves in some of these ways already, but these are just examples of some of the key metrics that folks are looking at and trying to strive to improve on. Independent analyst John Van Decker, who works for Gartner Research, has said that these tools actually have a tangible benefit in reducing the hard cost of doing the close-to-disclose process, and sometimes as much as 30%. And so there really is sort of a tangible ROI to this process, and not just the intangible things like lower stress for our client, for our staff, and mitigated risk in terms of errors in the filing as well. So very real benefits that these types of solutions can offer and provide when implemented and executed properly and effectively. Let's talk about a few of these standards. XBRL is the first one, and this really is about an electronic language, a common apples-to-apples way of filing our financial results. And there are many, many different jurisdictions and regulators out there around the world in the various different geographic regions that are adopting XBRL as a way of collecting information from all the various different companies and being able to have apple-to-apple comparisons of that data. In Europe, lots of organizations there. There's iXBRL filings in the UK through Companies House. Asia-Pac is very active right now in terms of various different governments that are adopting these scenarios. In North America, we've had the US SEC that has been requiring companies to do XBRL for 3 or 4 years now, so it's nothing new in the US. Canada is considering it as an adoption for electronic filing. But I think the message really here is that we can expect that these types of electronic filing mechanisms and standards will continue to evolve and emerge and to progress so that we file more of our data in this manner. And I suppose at the end of the day, we need to be ready for that. From an IFRS perspective, this is really about an apples-to-apples standard for accounting and trying to ensure now in this globalization, this global market that we're seeing, we want, or I guess the desire is that everybody accounts for their companies and their operations and transactions in a way that's consistent. And so we're seeing increasing adoption of IFRS throughout the world. We know that the U.S. has kind of put the brakes on that right now and kind of in a holding pattern. But we eventually, I think it's reasonable to expect that some sort of hybrid of IFRS will be adopted in the U.S. Canada's already gone to IFRS. Many parts of Europe have been on IFRS for quite some time, and you can see that there's other parts of the world that are sort of on the roadmap or well on their way to adoption. All right, so that's a little bit about what's going on in the market. Let's look now more closely at how the solution, disclosure management, can help us with this close-to-disclose process. So if we think about the close-to-disclose process, there's many steps. And if we look at this chevron chart, starting on the left-hand side, we've got our general ledgers, sub-ledgers, so on and so forth. And then we go through various different activities to close out and finalize various different components of those books, whether it be close out AP, AR, so on and so forth. Then we do the closes of the various different divisions, ledgers around the world. We may then embark on intercompany reconciliations, so on and so forth. Global, eventually global consolidation, so we get our financial results consolidated, eliminated, so on and so forth. and then from there we start the actual disclosure process. And that's really what we're focusing on today, is that sort of last mile of finance, if you will. What happens after we get a set of consolidated financial statements and now have to start worrying about regulatory disclosure, notes, MD&A, all those types of things. The reality that many of us face in this area is that we're using Microsoft Office as our tool set. We're relying on a lot of spreadsheets to collect that data and put it into a format that makes sense for the regulatory disclosure. And that's very difficult to maintain, as you well know. We then have a number of different stakeholders within our companies that are responsible for providing and developing content that goes into those note disclosures that, as we all know, provide that qualitative description and explanation of the financial results and our accounting policies. And then we try to bring all of that together. We try to work together as best we can to do that effectively, pull it all together into a Word document, and then sort of go about the steps of filing that either with EDGAR from an HTML perspective, or finally now in the US with the XBRL filing mandate to the SEC as well. And we're not being given more time to do that. So the question is, how do we find time in this very difficult and arduous process to now be able to do more within that same finish line timeline? And one of the answers there, obviously, is we need to be more efficient, effective, and streamlined. And software solutions are now available to do that, and that's exactly what this solution is really aimed to do. So if we take a look at what that diagram looks like now when we apply the disclosure management solution to it, it really is about organizing, streamlining, and simplifying the process. So we've got our various different sources of data on the left-hand side, and we bring the relevant data from each of those data sources into an organized and centralized data cache or repository. And from there, it feeds into the reports. We apply a collaborative and configurable workflow to that so that all the various different stakeholders can work on their component or section of the report in parallel. And then we embed within that report the XBRL tags as we need to. And then so when that report, when the numbers settle down and are finalized and everybody's finished their reviews, we simply pull a trigger and then we can do multiple filings, whether it be HTML for EDGAR, XBRL, so on and so forth, within one or from one structured report. And that really just helps us to organize and streamline that process. And really what it does is makes it predictable, repeatable, and also allows us to layer in changes at even up to the very last minute and not have to worry about the amount of work that we're going to have to do to double check, to manually go 2 fingers across and double tick and tie all the various different areas that could be impacted by that last minute change. So said differently, what we really want to do, and you know, that's sort of the title of the webinar, is reduce time, risk, and cost of regulatory disclosures, and that's exactly what this solution is intended to do. So if we look at this sort of the key concept, the first one is to give you speed and flexibility. We want to be able to give you an environment where you can generate the statements in your format with your sections, but do that in a way that allows you to integrate to the various different data sources so that we've got the electronic flow and automation of that flow of data from the sources into the report. We want to provide as much optimization in that process as possible, but still maintaining the flexibility so that you work in a way that makes sense for your business. We want to provide effective collaboration so that you can have multiple stakeholders all working on their own sections of the report in parallel, as opposed to trying to pass a report around and then amalgamate changes. But we also, and perhaps most importantly, we want to do that in a way in which everybody in the process trusts the results. At the end of the day, I think the most important thing is that we trust the results that are produced as part of this solution. And so the solution has a number of different tools that we'll look at that provide us that trust or build that trust. Things like document compare, revision control, auditability, etc. Those are what really build the trust, and that's what the software delivers to you. It also allows you to support the use of the solution for multiple different types of financial and regulatory requirements, not just for SEC filings. If you think about some companies, it might be a private company, but many of those types of companies also go through an MD&A process at quarter end. And it's really no different than what a public company does. It's just that they don't have to file it externally at the end. So very important that you understand that the software can be used for more than just SEC filings. And for any type of reporting process that involves a lot of narrative, qualitative data, multiple different data sources, and multiple different people within your organization who are trying to collaborate and work on that process together. Okay, so depicted a little bit more detail here. So the basic concepts in terms of the report structure. On the left-hand side of this diagram, we see the various different sources of data. Could be your general ledger system, could be your consolidation system. Whatever those sources are, where the numbers come from that feed into your Q or your K or your 20F, whatever report it is you're trying to produce, your MD&A even. And then they feed into that centralized data cache, and then from there, those numbers are linked into the various different reports. And all of those things live inside the disclosure management umbrella or database, if you will. Let's drill down on that one more level. So if we think about the data cache and how those numbers flow, within your, let's say, annual report, you'll see certain numbers, revenue, margin, those types of numbers, that will be repeated multiple different times throughout that report. They may appear 9, 10 different times in various different forms. In some tables, they might be in billions, decimal millions. In other statements, maybe in a footnote disclosure, they might be in a totally different scale and format. So we want to be able to have that data represented once in the data cache, but then rippled and reflected in each of those different places throughout the report, such that if the number changes, we update it once and it flows to those places seamlessly, and we don't have to go and manually check all those places individually and make sure that we captured all of the proper places to reflect that change. Extremely important concept is that store the data cache once and then electronically link that to the various different chapters and statements and disclosures and notes where it's relevantly needed. The last concept is that the XBRL tags, should you need to do XBRL filing, are also embedded directly in the data cache and also in the narrative in the Word note disclosures as well. So as we update those numbers, as we update those notes, we don't have to retag everything, so that at the end, when it's time to go ahead and do the XBRL filing, all we have to do is simply do the XBRL filing. We don't have to worry about retagging and a big exercise to validate that that's accurate, because it's been done once ahead of time. It's embedded with the overall setup of the document, and now we don't have an additional amount of time at the end of the process when we're tight for time to have to worry about what's going on with the XBRL piece. Very important concept. So for the specific case, for those of you out there who do have to worry about XBRL tagging, it's not just one document that we have to file when we do this. There's a whole series of documents that go along with one of these filings to the SEC. There's a series of data files that I think they're technically XML files. And one of those is the XBRL instance document. But we also have to submit the definition of our taxonomy along with that data as well, because the SEC wants to see all of the bases on which we base that XBRL filing. if you're doing an HTML file, for example, an AGR filing, so on and so forth, or you also not only have to file the financial statements, but there's a series of exhibit files that you need to be submitted as well. So, for example, there may be 8 or 9 different files that you need to create and produce, and the software creates all of these things for us and packages them all together. And on the EDGAR and SEC website where you do these filings, they are very easily loaded into that interface, and I'll show you a couple of screenshots in a little while of the actual SEC website. So the important thing here is there's lots of different files, and in fact, the next slide, as I flip over here, really shows us an example of filing of an HTML. Actually, it's both. The top part is the document filings, and you see a whole bunch of HTML files there for exhibits that support a 10Q. And then down at the bottom, we've got the XBRL instance document, and then the taxonomy schemas, the link bases, all the files that support that XBRL instance document. And all of those files together are what constitute the filing. It's not just one of them. Okay, so let's get into a demonstration. You can actually see what the software looks like and get a feel for the workflow and how everybody works together. All right, so we're going to be assuming the role of 2 or 3 or 4 different users within this software within a finance department to see what the type of jobs that they do. So I'm going to log on. This first person really is responsible for managing the data cache and updating the data from the various different sources, whether it be general ledger, so on and so forth. We organize the data into time periods, so you can do that quarterly or annually, whatever suits you. So I'm going to select the Q3, and then you can also do it by report as well. So you may be filing different reports on any given time period, so we can file and organize the data based on those various different reports. So I'm going to access the data repository. Within that data repository, we've got financial statements, and then we've got some key figures. And the chapters, if you will, we've got chapter 1 and 2 here. That breakdown is totally up to you in terms of the number of chapters, if you will, and the buckets that you break down this data into. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Edit, and it's going to take us into this particular aspect of the data cache. And you'll notice that it's just an Excel spreadsheet with an add-in. So the user interface fundamentally is a sort of a web panel that we were seeing just a minute ago to sort of manage and control things, and then a Microsoft Office-centric user interface, whether it be Microsoft Excel for the data cache or Microsoft Word when you're actually preparing the report. So here you can see that there's a disclosure management ribbon that has been added up on the toolbar that allows us to do things like create links to the data sources, allows us to refresh the workbook, and sort of check in and check out changes, etc. Let's go ahead and flip over to the income statement. And here you can see that we've got the various different lines on our income statement, and we've got our 3 months ended, 9 months ended, this year, last year, so on and so forth. And this represents the data that we want to disclose in the financial statements section of the report. Now, this data is coming from, ideally, from an electronic source, maybe from your consolidation system. It could be coming from your general ledger. And there's multiple different data sources that are natively supplied out of box. Obviously, we provide native integration to various different SAP data sources, things like BW or ERP, but also non-SAP data sources as well. So it could be just a regular Excel file that's been submitted, any ODBC compliant database, SQL Server databases, so on and so forth. All can be linked natively without having to either copy, paste, or do manual type of connections. Okay, so let's exit out of here and go back to our web screen. And Occasionally throughout the process, you may need to update the content in those data caches. So if we flip to the content refresh section of the web panel, we can now see that this particular data cache has got data coming to us from different sources. And we can go ahead and click the Start Refresh in order to pull the data changes from those various different sources of data, whether it be, as I indicated earlier, whether it be SAP data sources like BW or ERP, or whether it be your consolidation solution. And if you use BPC or financial consolidation from SAP, those are natively supported as well. So we can pull that data and refresh the data cache. Once we do that, then we have the ability to ripple that into the reports, similar to that diagram that I showed you earlier. So let's keep moving along here. I'm going to sign out from this user, assuming that they've pulled some data changes from those source systems. And we'll log out. So now what we want to do is log in as somebody who's responsible for the actual report document. So they're actually working on the queue in this particular case, and the queue has been broken down into chapters. You can see that on the left-hand side, and we've got chapters and subchapters. And you can break the report down into as many different chapters as makes sense for the way that you want to either break down the workload so that different people can work on different sections, or to break it down functionally such that different things are filed together. For example, there might be a tax disclosure. So we could have a chapter that's just the tax disclosure. And that gives us the ability then to assign certain individuals to be able to work on that chapter in parallel with all the other chapters at the same time. It's also important to note that each and every one of these chapters has its own workflow and its own revision control as well, such that some of them might have different due dates, they might have different stages of workflow completion, and they may have different revisions as well. So the first thing I want to do is bring your attention to the workflow section down at the bottom area. And what we want to do, we can see the due date for this, and we can see that it's open, i.e. it's not started. It's been open for us to work on, but we've not started. So I'm simply going to click on the link to say Start Work, and that's going to update the workflow such that the controller and the other people monitoring the process can now see that the status is in progress, indicating to them that, hey, we're working on it. And you can also see that the little status icon on the left-hand side in the Explorer window has updated to reflect the fact that we've now started that workflow. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and click the Edit button and check that data out and start working on it. And you'll notice here that, as before, when we work on the data cache in Excel, I'm now working in standard Microsoft Word. I've got a Disclosure Management add-in in my ribbon on my toolbar. And that provides me, again, just as before, the ability to link electronically so that I can pull the data without having to manually type it, and also allows me to do things like insert electronic values, update my commentary, refresh the data, so on and so forth. So I don't know if, hopefully you recognize some of these numbers. The 1725 number, we saw that in the data cache. The 4671 was in there as well. So it's pulling that data directly through into Microsoft Word electronically. So as that data changes, the changes ripple into the various different report chapters. Let's scroll down, and we'll notice that at the bottom of the report, there's an area, and we want to add a new financial disclosure. So what we want to do is start typing here that we want to say that our gross sales have increased from a certain value to a certain value, so from last year to this year. But we don't want to manually type this number. We want to electronically insert this number such that if it changes, we don't have to worry about the fact that we've got to find it and change it in all the various different places throughout the chapters of the report. So we're going to make use of the Create Formula field option up on our toolbar. Now the table that we had saw up at the top of the report was created using the Create Table option. So that's an entire table of data that's been linked. But in this case, we just want to link a single number, so we're going to use the Formula field option. That's then going to allow us to select visually from the table of data the appropriate values. So the first value we want to represent is from last year, which is this 1553 number. We can specify the format type and the scale for this particular representation of that number. Do we want it millions, thousands, decimal 1, decimal 2, etc.? And once we've selected those things, we can go ahead and click the little green arrow, which then drops the number into the report. You can tell that it's a linked value by the fact that it's highlighted. Okay, that's how you know it's a difference between a linked number and a manually typed number. Okay, so it's increased from so-and-so to, and then we want to insert the number from this year. It's 3 months ended for this year as opposed to last year, 1725. Select the various different settings and go ahead and link that as well. Now, we're linking the actual numbers, but you may be saying, well, what happens if it decreased? You can actually parameterize the increase-decreased as well, such that you can actually parameterize and electronically link that word such that if it's increased, it says increase. If it went down, it says decreased. So you have the ability to parameterize all those things that might change. We want to parameterize those such that it's electronically handled for us. All right, so we've inserted now some new text, narrative, and also some linked numbers into our report. So one of the things that we need to do with the report, in the US at least, is to file with EDGAR. And there are certain rules that we have to abide by in the document in order for EDGAR to accept a valid filing. So let's go up to our other area, and we can go ahead and do the conversion of this document to HTML. And when it does that, it's going to apply all of the rules and validations and things that the EDGAR filing manual dictates, and it's going to tell us the various different places in the document where we might have problems. So things that run into problems if you have embedded Excel objects inside Word, they don't EDGARize very well. If you have linked or references to external websites, they're not allowed. If you have references to files that might be stored on a network shared drive, they're not allowed, so on and so forth. So all of those rules that are mandated by EDGAR are going to be tested and applied, and it's going to tell you where you have problems. Fantastic. So it's starting to automate all these processes for me. All right, so let's go ahead and save this now, and we can save it in the EDGAR format. It's a zip file. You have to save it and file it in, so we can go ahead and do that. All right, and now we want to basically put this away. We're finished making our changes. We want to apply those changes and check them into the database. So I'm going to click on Apply Changes, and when I go ahead and do that, it checks it back into the database and updates the revision number. I can also, at this point, adjust my workflow. If I know that I'm finished, I can go ahead and click on Finish, and it's now going to change the workflow to finished and pass that along to somebody else. Your workflow might say, after these changes are completed, an additional person or a different person, maybe a manager, so on and so forth, has to review and approve the document. So we're going to click on Finished. And I'm going to add a comment. I know it's going to go to Bill. Bill will finish the statement. You can go ahead and now review it. And when that happens, this user now is not able to do anything. Notice their possible activities have gone away. So they're absolutely locked out, and they're now waiting for Bill to go ahead and review and approve the document. So let's go and have a look at what Bill's going to do. Okay, so we're going to log out. And now we're going to log on as Bill, who's an approver. So Bill can now see his screen is exactly the same, except that he's got different role. You'll notice now in the workflow section that the status is finished, but Bill, because he's an approver, has the ability to reject or approve the change. And you'll also notice that various different sections of the workflow, the one section we've been working on is completed now, and all the rest haven't yet been started. So Bill may say, you know what, I want to look at the revision history. I want to understand what changed. What changed from yesterday to today? That's one of the key concepts as it relates to trust, because we know that the system is automatically linking data, but we want to be able to see what's changed, and that's important both in the data cache and in the report. So the system, I talked about each and every chapter having its own revision control. Here you can see revision number 3 was what we started with before. Revision number 4 is what we just created now. But I want to compare those two files. I want to see what changed between them. That's one of the key things that's going to help me trust the data in this process. We click on Compare Files, and it's going to show me in standard Microsoft Word terms the original document in the top right, the revised document in the bottom right corner, and then the compared document with all the changes throughout. And then on the left-hand side, there's a summary panel which shows you that we inserted that whole gross sales increase from to for the same quarter. So you can actually see that. And this whole comparison screen is configurable so that you can look at it in the way that you want and make use of the track changes features of Microsoft Word as you want to. And it's important for you to keep in mind that all of this is just standard Microsoft Word. We're just providing you with the ability to do the revision controls and also all of the workflow for each of these chapters. Okay, so we've looked at the comparison of the two documents. We understand what changed. We're comfortable with it. So we're going to close up this compare document, and we now might want to say, well, let's go back. I want to look at this document now, but I don't want to look at it in Word. You have the ability to look at it in other formats as well, things like PDF. So if you wanted to send out the document for somebody to look at in a PDF form, you can go ahead and do that, and that's a standard feature. Let's open it up in in PDF, and you can see here just standard Adobe Reader, and there's the document. You can see it, sort of with all the various different links highlighted appropriately, so on and so forth, and you can do your thing with PDF. All right, so let's close that up. So we've now had Bill. He's happy with it. He's looked at it. He understands what's changed, and now he wants to approve it. So Bill's going to go ahead and do that approval, and now you can notice that it's now approved, which basically means it's totally locked up, except for the certain users who might have the ability to reopen it. But that workflow is totally configurable. So if you think about how you conduct your workflow process, does it go from preparer to approver, and then maybe there's another level of approval, so on and so forth. So those workflow steps are configurable within the solution, which provides you the ability to work the way that your team likes to work together. Okay. The next thing we might want to do is take all the various different chapters of the report and compile them together into an overall report. So we're going to go up to the overall root level of the Form 10Q, and you notice that when we do that, we have the ability to create an overall report, which basically involves taking all the chapters, compiling and collating them together so that we can send that overall document out for review from senior management, maybe the audit committee, so on and so forth. And when we do this, this document also has its own revision control. So as we go through the various different drafts, we actually can save all of those. And we can also do the compare feature at that level as well, so we can see at the overall document level what changed from draft to draft. Okay, so let's keep moving along. I'm going to log out now, and let's take a look at the XBRL side. So we're going to log in as someone who's going to be doing the XBRL tagging. Just as before, we're going to select a time period. And also now we're going to select the XBRL data. So now we've got our XBRL tag data, and we're going to go ahead and edit that. And so now what we see is we've got, here's our income statement, and there's the 1725 number that I talked about before. It's the same number. And what we're really doing now is just applying the XBRL tag that's going to get embedded with that particular cell of data. We can see that this particular cell, E8 that we're on, is actually not highlighted in green, indicating that there has not yet been an XBRL tag applied to this particular cell. So in addition to technically doing the work. We also have visual highlighting so that we know which cells are tagged and which ones aren't. And I did this on purpose just so you can see how we do this process. In the little window on the right-hand side is the taxonomy that we're tagging against. So you can see here we're in the income statement section, and we want to take this thing called revenue goods gross, and we want to tag against our gross sales. So to do that, you simply drag and drop onto the appropriate cell, and that's then going to turn the cell yellow, which means it's partially tagged. It's not complete, because we have to tag 3 different items. We have to tag the concept, which we just did, and then we have to tag the context, which is the time period, and the unit, which is the currency. So let's go ahead and click on our list of contexts, which is all the time periods, and then we simply click on that, and we tag that, and when you're finished, it then turns everything green. Now, so that's one, visually one way, but there's also another way that we can tell if it's okay, and that is to use our reports, and we can run a validation report against our tag data so that it'll actually tell us how well we're doing in terms of mapping all of our various different line items and narratives and notes, etc., to the taxonomy. So if we run the validation report, we can run it against any subset of all the various different data. We don't have to do it against everything. So if we're just working on one section, we can just do it on that one section, in this case the P&L. And we click on the Validate button, which is now going to show us the results of a calculation trace. And really what we're looking for here, when you have a problem, over on the right-hand side in the message column, it'll be highlighted in red, and it'll tell you what's wrong. And not only do we have to tag both the source numbers and also all of the subtotals as well. And then the calculation trace does a sort of a reverse add and make sure that everything you said should add up does in fact add up, and that there's no inconsistencies. So we're basically looking for OK, OK all the way down the right-hand side. Great. So the system's helping me to know if I'm tagged properly or not. So at this point, what we can do is then save this, save as XBRL, because we want to file this in XBRL format, so we can save the data in the Excel template, and we're going to go ahead and save that as an XML instance document. And then we can go ahead and, we obviously do the rest of the work, but this sort of following along as we go here. So the next step, once you finish all this, would be then to actually either test file this with the SEC, or actually go ahead and do the filing. So let's take a look at what that looks like. All right, so we're going to go on to the Edgar website, and what we want to do is go to the Edgar link online form submission. And each company that's required to do a filing with the SEC is given a user ID and a password to this Edgar site. And we select the form that we'd wish to submit. In this case, it's our 10Q, and we say go to form. And then from here, we say whether or not we're doing a live or test filing. So it's a good practice to do a test filing to see if, basically to double check on the work that we just did inside the software. And once we click test filing, we're going to go to documents, because we want to specify the documents that we want to test file. And here's the entire list of documents that we sort of looked at on the slides 10 or 15 minutes ago. And we say what type it is. And then we simply click on the doc validation button, which is now going to do that test filing for us. And it will tell us how many documents there were to check, 9, how many were validated, 9, and how many have errors, 0. So we now know that that filing is good to go, and we could actually do a live filing. There are no technical errors with that filing, and that's imperative. You cannot file if you have errors. So the software produces an error-free filing once everything is tagged properly. And that's basically the process at a high level from end to end. So what I'd like to do now is sort of wrap up and summarize, and we've got some time for Q&A. So in summary, I talked earlier about those three key tenets of speed and flexibility, collaboration, and compliance and control. But really the important thing from your perspective is what's in the second column, and why do I care, in essence. And really the speed and flexibility, the ability to electronically link the data, the ability to provide you with a user interface which is familiar to all of your users, is really about reducing the amount of time that it takes for you to go through the process, and also eliminate errors. Obviously, errors get eliminated when we don't have to touch the data or check the data manually. So we can rely on system tools to help us to validate and check, and also obviously linking means that we can't make any of those typo-type errors as well. From a collaboration perspective, that's really about streamlining the process, and that's going to reduce our cost because it's going to also take less time as well. But the other important thing on the collaboration side is that we're not only, as I mentioned earlier, able to satisfy SEC filings, but also other types of reports, whether it be an internal MD&A, management PowerPoint decks, could be other regulatory filings that we have to do that are based on the same type of data. In Europe, they've got a lot of requirements like the Basel requirements, FinRep, CoRep, Solvency II, so on and so forth. And basically what happens is we can use the tool, the solution for all of those different types of reports, and that drastically lowers our TCO because you don't have to keep relicensing the software to do that. The third item is really about the compliance side and the risk side, which is, from a CFO, CXO perspective is hugely important and what they're most interested in, and that really is about that trust. But also about bringing it in-house as well, because a lot of times in this process, we want to be able to control our own destiny as best we can. By bringing it in-house, we're able to do that. The trusted side, we looked at the various different compare features and tools, revision control, auditability, workflow, etc., that helps us to gain that trust and to trust that the numbers are electronically linking and automating properly. And then over time, obviously, we know that it works, and we are able to very sort of gain those efficiencies to the maximum possible benefit. Okay, so I think that's all I wanted to say. You can certainly, if you want to explore this in more detail and sort of if it piqued your interest, there are 3 different web links here. You can experience it for yourself. We've got an entire website dedicated to CFO. The top link, we've got a newsletter that has salient stories, tidbits, information on a monthly basis. And there's also a specific web link there for the disclosure management solution that we've just spent the last 50 minutes or so reviewing and going through. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it back over to David, and we can have some Q&A.
Thank you, Tony. Great presentation there. I can really see how that can really help us through this process. I want to remind everybody that if you have a question for Tony, please use the question box in the GoToWebinar panel as we transition into the Q&A. So use that box, and we'll get those questions to Tony. If we don't get them answered in the Q&A, we will have him follow up with you directly. So the first question I have is, the question is, do I need to have SAP, ERP, or GL to use this disclosure management tool?
No, not at all. So in addition to supporting natively SAP data sources like GL, so on and so forth, the solution is wired, if you will, to support SQL Server, ODBC, Excel, all those types of data sources natively as well. So absolutely, categorically, no, you do not need SAP GL.
Great. Okay. Again, if anyone has a question, please use the question box. The next question is, do I still need to use the service of an external printer to file my reports if I use SAP's disclosure management tool?
Good question. So if you are using an external printing service today to do your XBRL tagging and the actual filing, you do not need to continue doing that. But some companies make the choice to say, you know what, I don't have the skill set in-house. I don't really have, you know, the headcount to do the XBRL piece inside, so I want to continue leveraging that service. So I guess, you know, it's a long-winded way of saying you can do it using the printer, or you can bring it all in-house and have the software do it for you. So it's totally up to you to make the choice.
Okay. The next question is, if I am not going to use the XBRL function, can you talk about the value add and where that comes in if I don't see that as an option that I'm going down that path?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, probably 90% of the benefits and value proposition of solution are totally unrelated to XBRL. That's just one more piece at the end. What it really is about is organizing, streamlining, and simplifying any type of reporting process that involves multiple data sources, lots of narrative and qualitative data where we're compiling those notes or discussions, and also multiple stakeholders. So if you've got that type of scenario in your company, disclosure management is absolutely something to consider.
Okay. And our next question is, and if anyone else has some questions, we got just a couple more minutes here. Can you describe what customers use the solution for aside from SEC filings?
Yeah, so I think we've sort of covered this a little bit, but let me see if I can cover off some of the big ones. So private companies, a lot of them would use this. They've still got arduous MD&A type of exercises that they have their divisions and stakeholders go through on a monthly or quarterly basis, so it's absolutely good for that. A lot of companies are subject to some of these other regulator requirements, utilities regulators, financial services regulators. You might have things in Europe. They've got FinRep, CoRep, Basel, solvency, all those types of things. So any of those regulatory types of exercises typically involve the types of data collection and compilation tasks and challenges that we've been talking about today. So any of those types of things are all fair game.
Thank you for that, Tony. A few kind of wraps up our Q&A. I want to thank Tony for sharing everything with us. If we didn't get to your question today, we will be passing that on to him directly so that he can follow up at the end of the webinar. So I have a last few housekeeping items before we end today's webinar. Which at that time you'll be prompted to participate in a short survey. We truly value your feedback and appreciate your help so we can continue to bring you great content. Please join us as well on Proformative.com to continue this discussion. And I want to also remind everyone about our CFO Dimensions Conference that's coming up August 22nd in New York. This is the premier strategic leadership conference for CFOs and senior level finance folks. So hope that you can make it to New York. If you would like more information on this, in the post survey we will have a link so to provide you more information. I want to thank SAP for sponsoring this today and for Tony giving us his time and these insights. Also at this time, I want to thank the audience for your time. After we close down the webinar, you'll be prompted to take a short survey. If you please participate so we can get better, deliver you the right type of content, I'd greatly appreciate it. Also, at the end of the survey, you will have a link for an introduction to SAP or an introduction to Tony if you would like to follow up with some additional questions. Also there'll be a link for more information on CFO Dimension as I talked earlier. I want to thank you again. We hope to see you on another Proformative event or online at Proformative.com. This concludes our presentation. Have a great rest of your day.